I thought my 20th birthday would be the happiest day of my life. My father, Victor Vale, had promised me he would come to my birthday party. I had been waiting for him all evening. The cake was sitting on the table, untouched. I refused to cut it because I wanted my father beside me. He had promised he would be there, and I trusted him. Then my phone rang. It was one of my father's men. His voice was tense. "Adrian, you need to come to the hospital. Now." My heart immediately sank. When I reached the hospital, I ran through the corridors without even knowing where I was going. One of my father's men finally led me into a room. And then I saw him. My father was lying on a hospital bed, covered in blood, fighting desperately for his life. "Papa." The moment he saw me, he reached for me. I rushed to his side, and he pulled me into his arms. I could feel how weak he was. "Papa, what happened?" I cried. "Please, you'll be okay. The doctors will save you." He shook his head. "Adrian, listen to me. No. Don't talk like that." His breathing became heavier. "You have to be better than me, son." I stared at him through my tears. "Don't follow my path," he whispered. "Stay away from the underworld. Live a peaceful life. That's all I've ever wanted for you." I couldn't stop crying. "But you promised you'd come to my birthday." His lips trembled into a faint smile. "I know. You promised me, Papa. I'm sorry." Those were the last words my father ever said to me. His arms slowly loosened around me. "Papa." I froze. "Papa, wake up." "Nothing." "No." I grabbed him desperately. "You can't do this to me." My voice broke as I held him tighter. "You can't leave me alone." I screamed. I begged him to come back. I begged the doctors to save him. I begged anyone who could hear me to give me my father back. But he was gone. My father was dead in my arms. And I had no one else. He was my entire world. I had always known my father was involved with the mafia. I knew his life was surrounded by danger, but he had kept me away from that world. I didn't know his enemies. I didn't know how the underworld worked. I had never even wanted to know. Until that night. One of my father's men finally told me the truth. My father had been killed by the Black Serpent Syndicate, the most powerful mafia organization in the underworld. And the man behind it was their feared Enigma boss. Damien Blackthorn. The man who had taken my father away from me. The man who had left me completely alone. That night, on my 20th birthday, I made a vow beside my father's lifeless body. I would find Damien Blackthorn. I would destroy everything he had built. And I would make him pay for taking away the only family I had ever known. My father had begged me to stay away from his path. But he didn't understand one thing. He had been my whole world. And now that world was gone. So I had nothing left to protect. Nothing left to fear. And nothing left but revenge. For the next entire year, I did nothing except prepare myself for the day I would finally step into Damien Blackthorn's world. I knew I couldn't defeat a man like him by rushing in blindly. I knew nothing about the underworld. I had never been trained to fight, had never handled a weapon seriously, and had spent my entire life being protected from the dangerous world my father belonged to. But I had one thing Damien didn't know about. I was Victor Vale's son. And I was willing to sacrifice everything to avenge him. For 12 months, I trained harder than I had ever imagined possible. My father's remaining men taught me how to fight, how to protect myself, how to recognize danger, and how to keep my emotions hidden. I studied the structure of the Black Serpent Syndicate, learned the names of the people closest to Damien, and memorized every piece of information that could help me survive inside his organization. My father's most trusted lieutenant, Marcus Hale, was the one who helped me the most. He had been beside my father for decades. He knew the underworld better than anyone I had ever met. And he knew Damien. That's why, despite everything I wanted, Marcus was terrified of letting me go near him. One night, after another exhausting training session, Marcus stopped me before I left. "Adrian, there's something you need to understand." I looked at him. "Once you enter Damien's syndicate, you can't afford to make a single mistake." "I won't." "You don't know what you're walking into." His expression was unusually serious. "Damien Blackthorn isn't simply powerful. He's ruthless. He suspects everyone around him. And he has absolutely no mercy for traitors." I stayed quiet. Marcus took a breath. "If he ever discovers that someone has betrayed him..." He paused. "What?" "He doesn't just kill them." A chill ran down my spine. "He tortures them first." My fingers curled into fists. Marcus continued, his voice low. "I've heard stories of what he's done to people who crossed him. He wants them to understand exactly what they did wrong before he ends them." For the first time, I felt fear. Real fear. Until that moment, Damien had only been a name in my mind. The murderer of my father. The man I hated. But now I understood that I was planning to walk directly into the den of the most dangerous man in the underworld. If he discovered my identity, I wouldn't simply lose my chance at revenge. I might not survive long enough to leave his territory. For a moment, I wondered if my father had been right. Maybe I should walk away. Maybe I should choose the peaceful life he had begged me to live. Then I closed my eyes. And I saw him. My father's face on that hospital bed. The blood covering his clothes. His trembling hands around me. His tired voice telling me to stay away from his path. And then, his eyes closing forever in my arms. The fear inside me disappeared. My father had wanted me to live. But the man who murdered him had taken away the person who made that life worth living. I opened my eyes and looked at Marcus. I'm going. Marcus sighed. Adrian. I know how dangerous he is. I took a slow breath. I know what could happen if he discovers the truth. My voice shook slightly, but I didn't look away. But I'm still going. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Then promise me one thing. What? Don't let revenge turn you into him. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I didn't know if I could make that promise. All I knew was that I was ready. For an entire year, I had trained for this moment. I was no longer the sheltered son Victor Vale had desperately tried to protect. I was about to enter the Black Serpent Syndicate. I would earn Damien Blackthorn's trust. I would get close enough to destroy everything he had built. And no matter how terrifying the Enigma was, I would never forget why I had entered his world in the first place. I was there for my father. And I would not leave until Damien Blackthorn paid for taking him away from me. My 21st birthday was nothing like the birthdays I remembered from my childhood. There were no decorations. No guests. No laughter filling the house. And most importantly, there was no one waiting for me. I sat alone at the dining table with a small cake in front of me. Beside it, I had placed 2 framed photographs, one of my father, Victor Vale, and one of my mother. I stared at their faces for a long time. Then I lit the candles. The warm glow reflected in my tear-filled eyes. Happy birthday to me. The words barely came out. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. I looked at my father's photograph. Papa, you should have been here. My voice broke. You promised me you'd always be there. I lowered my head as tears began falling onto the table. For the next several minutes, I didn't even try to stop myself. I cried like the little boy who had once believed his father could protect him from everything. I miss you. I looked at my mother's picture. I miss you too. My chest hurt. I've been so lonely without both of you. I wiped my face, but more tears came. Sometimes I still wait for you to come home. I laughed bitterly through my tears. I know you're not coming back. I know that. I took a shaky breath. But I'm still waiting. I reached toward their photographs and gently touched the frames. I'll see you again someday. I paused. Just not yet. My eyes hardened slightly. I have one little thing left to finish. I knew exactly what that thing was. Damien Blackthorn. The man who had taken my father from me. I'll finish what I started. I closed my eyes. Until then, please watch over me. My voice became softer. And please give me your blessings. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this alone. For a long moment, I sat there in silence. Then I blew out the candles. The flames disappeared one by one. And with them, the last piece of the peaceful life my father had wanted for me seemed to disappear too. The next morning, I finally stepped into the Black Serpent Syndicate. My father's old associate, Elias Crow, was waiting for me. Elias had been one of my father's most trusted men. For years, I had known him simply as someone who had served my father faithfully. But there was something I hadn't known. Elias had secretly been working as a double agent. While remaining loyal to my father, he had also established himself inside Damien's organization. That connection was what allowed him to create a path for me into the Black Serpent Syndicate. He had arranged my identity, my position, and the story I would tell anyone who questioned me. Everything was ready. Except me. Before I entered, Elias grabbed my arm. Adrian. I turned toward him. His expression was unusually serious. Once you're inside, there won't be any room for mistakes. I know. No, he said firmly. You don't. His eyes darkened. You've heard that Damien is cruel. You haven't seen what he's capable of. I swallowed. If he discovers that you're Victor Vale's son, he won't simply kill you. My stomach tightened. Elias lowered his voice. His punishment can be far worse than death. I stared at him. His torture is the kind of thing a man doesn't survive mentally, even if his body does. I tried to hide my fear. Elias continued. So if you ever realize Damien has discovered your identity, don't let him take you alive. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I let out a nervous breath. Thanks. Elias frowned. For what? I gave him a faint, sarcastic smile. For making me even more terrified before my first day. He didn't smile back. I'm serious. I know. I looked toward the massive gates of the syndicate. My heart was pounding. I was scared. Of course I was. But then I remembered my father's face. The hospital. His final embrace. His last breath in my arms. And the fear slowly became smaller. I stepped forward. One foot after another. I was entering the world my father had spent his entire life trying to keep me away from. I was walking straight into Damien Blackthorn's territory. And he had absolutely no idea that the new recruit standing before him was the son of the man he had murdered. I had spent a year preparing for this moment. Now my revenge could finally begin. For the next 2 months, I worked inside the Black Serpent Syndicate without ever coming face to face with Damien Blackthorn. I kept my head down and did exactly what I had come there to do. I worked. I listened. I observed. And I learned. The longer I stayed, the more I realized how massive Damien's empire actually was. What I had once imagined as a single mafia organization was nothing compared to the reality. The Black Serpent Syndicate had people everywhere. Businesses, warehouses, private security, underground connections, informants, loyal soldiers, everything seemed to lead back to Damien. His name carried so much weight that sometimes people lowered their voices simply when talking about him. Yet I never saw him. For 2 months, Damien remained nothing more than a name and a shadow. Honestly, I preferred it that way. Because every day I stayed there, I reminded myself why I had entered. I was there to avenge my father. I was there to destroy the man who had murdered him. Then, on an ordinary morning, my entire plan changed. I stepped into the elevator just as the doors were closing. I pressed the button for my floor and stood quietly in the corner. A second later, the elevator doors opened again. A man stepped inside. And I forgot to breathe. He was enormous. Tall, broad, and powerfully built, with shoulders that nearly filled the space beside me. He wore a perfectly fitted black suit, every detail about him polished and effortless. He was the most handsome man I had ever seen. I had always been confident about my appearance. I was a strong alpha, and I knew I carried myself well. But beside this man, I suddenly felt insignificant. Then his scent reached me. My entire body froze. I had never been particularly sensitive to scents. Other people's pheromones had never affected me much. But his did. His scent surrounded me almost instantly. Deep, warm, powerful, and strangely addictive. My instincts reacted before my mind could understand what was happening. My heart started pounding. I couldn't stop looking at him. What was wrong with me? I had spent an entire year preparing to enter this organization. I had trained myself not to react to fear. Not to anger. Not to pressure. But one stranger's scent had completely destroyed my composure within seconds. He turned toward me. Our eyes met. Instead of the cold, terrifying expression I had imagined, his face was surprisingly calm. Almost gentle. Are you new here? His voice was deep, but there was nothing threatening about it. I swallowed. Yes. He smiled faintly. I'm Damien. My heart stopped. For one horrifying second, I couldn't hear anything except the pounding inside my chest. Damien. Damien Blackthorn. The man I had been hunting for a year. The man who had murdered my father. The man I had sworn I would one day kill with my own hands. I knew Damien was 29. I knew he was powerful. I knew he was feared by almost everyone in the underworld. But I had never seen his face. In my mind, I had imagined him countless times. A terrifying monster. A cruel, emotionless mafia boss. Someone whose very presence would make people tremble. But the man standing in front of me looked nothing like the picture I had created. Not even close. He was calm. Elegant. Ridiculously handsome. And his voice was far gentler than I expected. I wanted to hate him. I needed to hate him. But my stupid instincts seemed to have other plans. I forced myself to look away. Nice to meet you. My voice sounded surprisingly normal. Inside, however, I was screaming. That's him. That's the man who killed your father. Kill him. For 1 second, I imagined pulling out a weapon and ending everything right there. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed his trust first. So I forced a polite expression onto my face. Damien glanced at me. You seem nervous. I'm not. His lips curved into a small smile. Then why are you staring at me? I nearly choked. I was just surprised. By what? I quickly looked toward the elevator doors. Nothing. He let out a quiet laugh. And somehow, that simple sound made my heart beat even harder. I hated it. I hated the way his scent affected me. I hated the strange pull I felt whenever he stood close. And most of all, I hated that the man I had spent a year dreaming about destroying was nothing like the monster in my head. He was standing right beside me. Close enough for me to smell him. Close enough for me to see every detail of his face. Close enough for me to kill him. Yet for reasons I couldn't understand, I couldn't stop looking at him. The elevator doors finally opened. Damien stepped out first. He looked back at me. See you around. I forced a smile. Of course. The doors closed between us. The moment he disappeared, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. I pressed a hand against my chest. My heart was still racing. I closed my eyes. Get yourself together, Adrian. That man was not my mate. He couldn't be. He was my enemy. The man who had taken my father from me. And I would never allow my instincts to change that. At least, that's what I told myself. That afternoon, I tried my best to forget about the man I had met in the elevator. It should have been easy. After all, I had spent the last year preparing to hate Damien Blackthorn. But somehow, I couldn't forget his face. His voice. And most annoyingly, his scent. Later that day, I was working with a few other members when I heard one of them mention Damien. He's back. My hand stopped over the file I was reading. I didn't look up. Who? Damien. Another member sighed. He's going to be here for the next 15 days. Everyone immediately became more serious. One of them whispered, then we'd better make sure everything is perfect. Of course. You know how he is. He expects perfection. I pretended I wasn't listening. I kept my eyes on my work and acted as though their conversation didn't interest me. But I heard every word. And despite myself, I couldn't stop thinking about the elevator. The way Damien had looked at me. The calmness in his voice. The strange reaction my body had to his scent. I hated it. I reminded myself again and again that he was my enemy. The man who had killed my father. Nothing else mattered. Yet during those 15 days, I somehow crossed paths with Damien almost every day. Sometimes it was only for a few seconds. Sometimes we exchanged a few words. Sometimes I simply saw him walking through the syndicate surrounded by his men. Every encounter made my hatred feel more complicated. Because every time I looked at him, one part of me wanted to destroy him. While another part of me couldn't understand why I was so drawn to him. I hated that feeling. So I ignored it. I kept my distance whenever I could and controlled every reaction. I couldn't allow my emotions, or my instincts, to ruin the reason I had entered the syndicate. Then, on the 15th day, my manager summoned me. I walked into his office expecting another routine assignment. Instead, he looked at me and said, "You're being transferred." I frowned. Where? Damien's personal security. For a moment, I simply stared at him. Mine? He nodded. Damien reviewed your training records. He thinks you're capable enough to work directly under him. My heart immediately began racing. But this time, I wasn't afraid. This was exactly what I had wanted. For months, I had been trying to find a way closer to Damien. Now I didn't have to search anymore. He had invited me into his inner circle himself. I lowered my head, hiding the smile threatening to appear. Understood. Inside, I was almost celebrating. Everything was finally falling into place. The closer I got to Damien, the easier it would be to earn his trust. And once he trusted me, I would find the perfect opportunity to destroy him. At least, that was what I believed then. My new position changed my entire life inside the syndicate. I was no longer just another member. I was responsible for Damien's personal security. That meant staying near him almost constantly. I accompanied him to meetings. I followed him during important trips. I learned his routines, his habits, and the people he trusted. And then Damien took me somewhere I had never expected to see. His private island. It was where he lived with his parents and where he often handled the syndicate's most important affairs away from the mainland. The moment I stepped onto the island, I stopped. It was enormous. The ocean stretched endlessly around us, the water so clear that I could see beneath its surface near the shore. White sand surrounded the coastline. Tall green trees moved gently with the sea breeze. And beyond the garden stood an enormous estate overlooking the water. It wasn't simply a house. It was a world of its own. Beautiful gardens surrounded the property, with stone pathways winding through them. There were fountains, terraces, private docks, and balconies that overlooked the endless blue ocean. I had grown up around wealth. My father had been a powerful mafia boss. But I had never seen anything quite like this. I couldn't stop looking around. "It's beautiful," I murmured before I could stop myself. Damien glanced at me. "You like it?" I nodded. "Yeah." He smiled faintly. "My parents love this place. That's why I spend most of my time here with them." I looked toward the massive estate. "So this is your home?" "One of them." I smiled slightly. Of course. A man like Damien probably had homes everywhere. But there was something strange about seeing this side of him. The feared Enigma of the underworld had a peaceful home surrounded by ocean and gardens. It didn't match the terrifying image everyone had described to me. For a moment, I simply stood there, admiring the view. The breeze touched my face. The ocean glittered beneath the sunlight. And despite everything, I felt strangely peaceful. Then I remembered whose island I was standing on. Damien Blackthorn's. The same man I had sworn to destroy. I immediately looked away from the beautiful scenery. I couldn't let myself forget. I wasn't here to admire his world. I was here to infiltrate it. To earn his trust. And eventually, to make him pay for taking my father from me. Life on the island slowly became something I never expected. At first, every day had been part of my plan. Stay close to Damien. Earn his trust. Learn his weaknesses. And eventually destroy him. But the more time I spent beside him, the more I began discovering a side of Damien Blackthorn that I had never heard about. I learned about his private life. I learned that he loved quiet mornings and preferred working late at night. I learned that he rarely trusted anyone with his personal affairs, that he was incredibly close to his parents, and that he could spend hours sitting with them over dinner simply listening to them talk. But what surprised me most was the work he did outside the syndicate. Damien donated enormous amounts of money to hospitals and medical research. He funded scholarships for medical students. He supported laboratories working on treatments for serious diseases. He quietly paid medical bills for families who couldn't afford them. There were charities under his name that I hadn't even known existed. On the island, it seemed as though Damien spent most of his time doing good. I couldn't understand it. How could the same man everyone feared in the underworld spend his private life helping people? Then I saw what happened outside the island. One day, Damien took me with him during a syndicate operation. I didn't know exactly what the person had done, and Damien never explained it to me. I only heard his voice. Cold. Controlled. Completely different from the man I knew on the island. I didn't stay to watch what happened. I didn't need to. The sounds coming from the room were enough. For the first time, I was genuinely terrified of him. When we returned to the island that evening, I remained unusually quiet. Damien noticed immediately. He approached me gently. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "I'm fine." He didn't believe me. "You've been quiet since we left." "I'm just tired." Instead of questioning me further, he asked whether I had eaten. Then he told me to rest. That was when I began noticing something I hadn't paid attention to before. Damien was kind to his employees. He treated the people who worked on the island with respect. But he treated me differently. He remembered every little thing about me. He knew which foods I liked. He noticed whenever I was exhausted. He never forced me to accompany him somewhere if he knew I would be uncomfortable. If something frightened me, he quietly removed me from the situation without making me explain myself. And whenever I was injured or sick, he became almost impossible to deal with. He cared. He genuinely cared about me. And secretly, I loved it. Because every bit of affection meant I was getting exactly what I had wanted. Damien's trust. His attention. His emotions. His weakness. I had entered his world to become the person closest to him. And slowly, I was becoming exactly that. I encouraged it. I let him learn everything about me that wasn't connected to my real identity. I listened when he talked. I stayed beside him when he worked. I laughed at his rare jokes. I made him feel safe around me. And eventually, Damien stopped treating me like an employee. He treated me like someone he couldn't imagine losing. Then, one night, we were alone. We were talking quietly when the conversation suddenly stopped. Damien looked at me for a long moment. Then he stepped closer. His hand gently touched my cheek. I didn't move. He leaned toward me. And kissed me. The kiss was intense, emotional, and filled with everything he had been holding back. When he finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine. "I tried not to fall for you." His voice was barely above a whisper. But I couldn't stop. I looked into his eyes. "I love you, Adrian." For 1 second, I forgot how to breathe. Those were the words I had been waiting for. Not because I loved him. Because they proved I had succeeded. Damien Blackthorn, the man I had sworn to destroy, had fallen in love with me. So I gave him the answer he wanted. "I love you too." I kissed him again. And that night, we became a couple. After that, everything changed. Damien became even more protective of me. He wanted to know where I was. Whether I had eaten. Whether I had slept. Whether someone had treated me badly. Eventually, I started staying in his room. The first night felt strange. This was the same man I had once dreamed of killing. Yet now he was the man making sure I had enough blankets, reminding me to rest, and quietly checking whether I was comfortable before he went to sleep. Sometimes I'd wake during the night and find his arm around me. And every time, I'd remind myself that this was only part of the plan. Then one evening, Damien asked me about my family. My heart nearly stopped. "Tell me about your parents." I looked away. There was no way I could tell him the truth. So I lied. "I'm an orphan." His expression immediately softened. "I'm sorry." I forced a small smile. "It's okay. I've been alone for a long time." Damien reached for my hand. "You aren't alone anymore." I stared at him. Those words should have been meaningless. Instead, they stayed in my mind long after he said them. Because the truth was becoming harder to ignore. I had entered Damien Blackthorn's life intending to become his greatest enemy. But somehow, I was becoming the person he loved most. And without realizing it, I was beginning to wonder whether destroying him would hurt me too. Almost 6 months had passed since Damien and I became a couple. 6 months since the relationship that had started as nothing more than a carefully planned lie had slowly become the most confusing part of my life. By then, almost everyone in the syndicate knew about us. And Damien. He had become completely devoted to me. He called me his baby so often that sometimes I forgot it had once sounded strange to me. If I was tired, he would simply pick me up and carry me to our room, ignoring my protests. "Damien, I can walk." "I know." "Then put me down." "No." He would say it so calmly that I would eventually stop arguing. He listened to everything I told him, even the smallest, most meaningless things. If I complained about someone at work, he remembered. If I mentioned craving something, it somehow appeared in front of me later. Sometimes he would sit beside me and feed me himself while I talked about my day. "Open your mouth, baby. I can feed myself." "I know." Yet he would still hold the spoon toward me. He took care of me in ways I had never expected. If I was sick, he barely left my side. If I was exhausted, he made me rest. If I was uncomfortable somewhere, he would quietly take me away. And when we fought, he could be stubborn and terrifyingly difficult, but somehow he always became gentle afterward. The man who could terrify an entire room with a single look would hold me against his chest and whisper that he was sorry. He made me feel loved. Actually loved. And that was becoming my greatest problem. Because while Damien was falling deeper and deeper for me, I was still carrying the same secret. I was Victor Vale's son. I had entered his life to destroy him. And I still intended to. During those 6 months, Damien trusted me with more than I had ever hoped for. I learned more about his operations, his enemies, his business dealings, and the secrets of the underworld. I had finally gotten exactly what I wanted. His trust. His confidence. His love. But before I killed him, there was one thing I still needed to know. Why had he killed my father? I couldn't bring myself to take his life without knowing the truth. So I waited. I watched Damien. I waited for the right opportunity. Then, one day, we were away from the island when everything went wrong. The attack came without warning. Gunshots exploded around us. Damien's security team immediately surrounded him, moving with practiced precision. Men shouted as they tried to locate the attackers. I was separated from Damien in the chaos. I looked around, trying to find him. Then I saw one of the attackers. He had slipped through the security line. And his weapon was pointed directly at me. My body froze. I didn't have time to react. The gun fired. But Damien moved faster. He appeared in front of me. The bullet struck him in the chest, dangerously close to his heart. "Damien!" He staggered. For one horrible second, I thought he was going to fall. Blood began spreading across his clothes. I rushed toward him, but he looked at his men instead. "Get him out." His voice was strained. One of them immediately moved toward me. "Sir, we need to get you. Adrian first." I stared at him. "What? Take my baby to safety." My heart shattered. Even after being shot? Even while bleeding? His first thought was me. "Damien, no." I tried to reach him, but his security team pulled me away. "Let me go. Adrian, we have to move." "Damien." He looked at me one last time. And despite the pain on his face, his eyes were still focused on me. "Go." Then they dragged me away. I was forced into the car. The door slammed shut. And suddenly, Damien was gone. I sat completely still. I couldn't process what had happened. My hands began trembling. I looked down at them, but they wouldn't stop. My father's face appeared in my mind. The hospital bed. His final words. His death in my arms. I remembered the vow I had made. I had promised to destroy Damien Blackthorn. Then I remembered the way Damien had fallen in love with me. The way he called me his baby. The way he carried me when I was tired. The way he listened to every stupid little story I told him. The way he fed me. The way he protected me. The way he always made sure I felt loved. And now, he had taken a bullet meant for me. He hadn't even hesitated. He could have protected himself. Instead, he had protected me. I pressed my trembling hands against my chest. I didn't know whether Damien was alive. I didn't know whether the bullet had reached his heart. I didn't know if I would ever see him again. And that uncertainty terrified me. I should have felt relieved. The man I had sworn to kill might finally be dying. My revenge might finally be within reach. But I felt no happiness. Only fear. Only pain. Only the desperate need to know that Damien was still alive. My breathing became uneven. No. I whispered his name. Damien. My eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I didn't know when it had happened. I didn't know how. But somewhere between pretending to love him and being loved by him, Damien Blackthorn had become someone I couldn't bear to lose. My vision blurred. The world around me began spinning. I tried to stay awake. I needed to know if he survived. I needed to see him. I needed to hear his voice again. But the fear, the shock, and the emotions I had been holding inside for months finally overwhelmed me. The last thing I whispered before everything went dark was his name. Please, be alive. And then I fainted in the back seat, with no idea whether the man I had once sworn to kill was still breathing. The uncensored version of this story is available exclusively on my Patreon. If you want to experience the complete story with the scenes and moments that were edited for YouTube, check out my Patreon. Link in the description. When I opened my eyes, I was on a hospital bed. For a few seconds I didn't understand where I was, then I turned my head and saw Damien sitting beside me. Half of his upper body was covered with bandages and he looked pale, but as soon as he saw me awake he smiled and called me his baby. Seeing him there I almost stopped breathing, my eyes filled with tears and I started crying. I couldn't believe he was alive. He immediately came closer and started comforting me, telling me that he wasn't so weak that one bullet could kill him and that I didn't have to worry about him. Then he told me how I was unconscious for 2 days and how he was worried about me the whole time. I held him carefully and cried against him, then we hugged each other for a long time and he kissed me gently. After we were both stable, we returned to the mansion on the private island. Even though Damien was the injured one, he kept trying to take care of me, asking if I had eaten, if I was sleeping properly and whether I was still scared after the attack, but I stopped him and told him that he was the one who needed care, so I started taking care of him instead. And during those quiet days, my guilt became unbearable. I wanted to destroy Damien. I had promised my father that I would take revenge. But how could I kill the man who had given me so much love? Damien called me his baby. He would carry me whenever I was tired. He listened to every little thing I told him, even when I talked about something completely meaningless. He would feed me while I talked and remember every little thing I liked. He protected me, cared for me and made me feel loved every single day. And the more I knew him, the harder it became. I had never seen Damien hurt an innocent or helpless person. I had never seen him involved in selling drugs or doing anything that I believed would destroy innocent people's lives. Instead, I had seen him punish people in his own organization for selling drugs and harming others. I had seen him donate to hospitals and medical research, help families who couldn't afford treatment, support children and medical students, and care for his workers. I couldn't find the monster I had spent years hating. I only found Damien. The man who loved me. The man who had taken a bullet for me. I felt like I was trapped between being a good son and being a good human being. I couldn't betray my father's memory. But I couldn't kill Damien either. At one point, the pressure became so painful that I reached a breaking point and tried to end my own life, but I couldn't go through with it, and when I realized what I had almost done, I broke down completely. I didn't actually want to die. I just didn't know what I was supposed to do anymore. I wanted to tell Damien the truth. I wanted to tell him everything and finally stop lying to the person who loved me more than anyone. But before I could do that, my 22nd birthday came. I didn't tell Damien anything about it. According to the documents I had given him, my birthday was different, so I didn't expect him to know. That evening, I walked into our bedroom. And suddenly stopped. There was a cake sitting on the table. Written across it were the words, "Happy 22nd birthday, baby." A chill went through my entire body. Slowly, I looked toward Damien. He was sitting on the couch, watching me with a small knowing smile. And at that moment, everything became clear. I had been stupid. So stupid. I actually thought I could fool Damien Blackthorn. The man who noticed everything. The man who trusted almost no one. The man who somehow knew everything about the person he loved. How could I have believed he wouldn't discover the truth about me? I slowly walked toward the cake and sat down. I looked at the candles for a long moment before blowing them out. Then I cut a small piece of cake and ate it myself. After that, I looked directly at Damien. "I think you already know." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His expression told me everything. I took a deep breath. My father's name was Victor Vale. Damien's eyes remained on me. "I came here because I believed you killed him." My voice started shaking. I joined your syndicate to take revenge. I told him everything. How my father died in my arms on my 20th birthday. How I had spent a year training. How I entered his syndicate. How I planned to earn his trust and eventually kill him. I played with your feelings for my revenge. Tears started falling from my eyes. I made you believe I loved you because I wanted to get close enough to destroy you. I looked at him. But I failed. My voice broke. Because somewhere along the way, I really fell in love with you. I reached for my gun and pointed it toward him. I wanted to kill you. My hand was shaking badly. But I can't do it anymore. I slowly lowered the gun. I know how much you love me, Damien. Then I looked at the weapon in my hand. And I know you would never want to lose me. I put the gun against myself instead. Damien's expression finally changed. Adrian. I looked at him through my tears. This is my revenge. My voice broke completely. You took my father from me, so now you'll have to live with watching me die in front of you. I pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. I froze. I tried again. Still nothing. My hands began trembling as I looked at the gun in disbelief. Damien didn't move. He simply stared at me. I tried once more, but the weapon remained useless. Then Damien slowly stood and walked toward me. He took the gun from my hand without saying a word. I couldn't even look at him. I expected anger. I expected hatred. Instead, he gently lifted my face. And kissed me. I froze. When he pulled away, he looked into my eyes with that same soft expression I had seen so many times before. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Then he kissed my forehead. And I finally understood. He had known. He had probably known far longer than I could ever imagine. Yet instead of punishing me, he had waited for me to tell him the truth myself. Damien took the gun from my hand and watched me collapse into myself. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even look at him. My entire body was shaking, and tears kept falling no matter how hard I tried to stop them. Then Damien pulled me into his arms. Come here, baby. I didn't fight him. He lifted me gently and carried me toward the balcony. I barely noticed the movement. He sat down on the couch with me in his arms, holding me against his chest while I stared blankly at the floor. For several minutes, there was nothing but silence. Then Damien finally spoke. Adrian? I knew. I slowly raised my head. I knew everything. My breath caught. What? He gently wiped the tears from my face. I knew who you were before you ever entered my syndicate. I stared at him in disbelief. Before I came here? He nodded. I knew you were Victor Vale's son. I knew why you were coming. I knew what you had been planning. I knew the people who helped you get inside. My lips trembled. Then why did you let me? Because you were never my enemy. I couldn't understand. Damien took a slow breath. The people who killed your father weren't me. The words hit me harder than anything else that night. What? Your father was betrayed by his own people. I stared at him. Damien told me everything. After my father's death, several of his most trusted men had wanted control of his empire. They wanted his properties, his businesses, his money, and his position. But there was one problem. Me. As Victor Vale's only son, I was still the heir to everything. They needed me gone. So they created a story. They made me believe Damien Blackthorn had murdered my father. They knew I would seek revenge. And they deliberately gave me information that would lead me straight to Damien. They expected you to come here, Damien said quietly. They expected me to discover your identity and kill you. I felt sick. They wanted me dead? Yes. He looked at me with pain in his eyes. They wanted you removed so they could take everything your father left behind. I remembered everything. The people who had helped me. The information they had given me. The warnings. The carefully constructed story. I had believed every word. Then Damien told me about the attack. It wasn't an attack on me. I looked at him. It was an attack on you. My heart stopped. They knew you were with me. They knew where you would be. They wanted to finish what they started. My mind immediately returned to that moment. The gun. The attacker. Damien stepping in front of me. The bullet entering his chest. And his first order being to get me to safety. That's why I sent you away first, Damien whispered. I knew they were targeting you. My eyes filled again. I don't believe you. Damien didn't get angry. He simply nodded. I knew you wouldn't. I looked at him desperately. Then why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Because I needed proof. His answer was calm. I knew what was happening, but I couldn't accuse your father's people without evidence. I needed something that couldn't be denied. He reached for a folder that had been sitting nearby. Then he placed it in my hands. Now I have it. I opened it. There were documents. Financial records. Messages. Transaction histories. Names. Everything connecting my father's former associates to his murder. Everything showing how they had manipulated me. Everything proving they had wanted me dead too. My hands began trembling. I read through the evidence again and again. And then I broke. My father hadn't been killed by Damien. The man I had spent 2 years hating hadn't taken my father from me. I had been wrong. Completely wrong. I covered my face and cried. Damien immediately pulled me back against his chest. I know, baby. I hated you. I know. I wanted to kill you. I know. I lied to you. I know. My voice cracked. Why did you keep me? Damien was silent for a moment. Then he gently lifted my face. Because I loved you. I stared at him. From the first day? He nodded. The moment I entered that elevator, I knew something was different. He brushed his thumb across my cheek. As an enigma, I can recognize my mate. My heart stopped. I knew you were mine. I couldn't speak. Your scent, your presence, everything told me. Even though you knew I wanted to kill you? Even then. His answer came without hesitation. I knew you were angry. I knew you were carrying grief. But I also knew you weren't evil. Tears filled my eyes again. So you just kept me close? I wanted you where I could protect you. His voice softened. I knew if you stayed near me, no one would be able to hurt you. I finally understood. The protection. The care. The way he always wanted me beside him. The way he refused to let me witness the darkest parts of his world. The way he had taken the bullet for me. He had known my intentions. And he had still chosen me. I looked down at the evidence in my hands. All this time, Damien wrapped his arms around me. You were fighting the wrong enemy. I started crying again. But this time, the tears weren't filled with hatred. They were grief. For my father. For the years I had wasted. For the hatred I had carried against the wrong man. Damien held me through all of it. Then his expression changed. The tenderness disappeared from his eyes, replaced by the coldness I had seen in the syndicate. I promise you, Adrian. He held my face gently. The people who did this to your father will pay. His voice was quiet, but there was no doubt in it. They took your father from you. They manipulated you. They tried to make you kill the man who loved you. He pulled me close again. I won't let them walk away from this. I closed my eyes against his chest. For the first time since my father's death, I didn't feel the need to hold on to revenge. Because I finally knew the truth. And the man I had once entered Damien's world to destroy had been protecting me from the very beginning. A few days later, Damien finally kept the promise he had made to me. He found the men who had betrayed my father and uncovered everything they had done. When it was over, he came back to me with a calm expression, but I could see in his eyes that everything had been settled. Then he placed a thick file in front of me. These belong to you. I opened it and froze. They were my father's property documents. His businesses. His accounts. His houses. Everything that had been stolen from our family after his death. I looked at Damien in disbelief. You got all of this back? He nodded. Every part of your father's estate that I could recover. I couldn't say anything for a while. For years, I had believed my father's entire legacy had disappeared with him. Now it was sitting in front of me. But I didn't want most of it. I kept only the things that truly mattered to me, a few photographs, my father's old watch, some letters, and several small belongings that carried memories of the man I had loved more than anyone. Everything else, I decided to donate. The money, properties, and resources could help people who actually needed them. When I told Damien what I had decided, he looked at me with so much pride that my eyes filled with tears. I couldn't be more proud of you, baby. I smiled. For the first time, my father's legacy didn't feel like something that belonged to revenge. I could finally turn it into something good. And after that, our life changed completely. The darkness that had followed me for years slowly disappeared. There were no more secrets between Damien and me. No more pretending. No more hatred. Just us. Our days became peaceful. Damien still called me his baby. He still carried me whenever I was tired, even when I insisted I could walk myself. He still listened to every little thing I said as though it was the most important conversation in the world. And I finally understood that I hadn't lost my family. I had found another one. Then, one morning, everything changed again. I discovered I was pregnant. When the doctor told us, I couldn't speak. I simply looked at Damien. He stared at me for several seconds as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Are we having a baby? I nodded. A huge smile slowly appeared on his face. He pulled me into his arms, laughing and carefully holding me as though I were the most precious thing in the world. He immediately started asking questions. Was the baby healthy? Was I healthy? What did I need? What should I eat? What should I avoid? I laughed at how quickly the feared mafia Enigma had turned into an anxious father-to-be. That evening, we celebrated together. Nothing extravagant. Just Damien, me, and the little life growing inside me. We talked for hours about the future. About the home we wanted to build. About the kind of parents we wanted to be. About how our child would never have to grow up surrounded by the pain and hatred that had shaped our lives. And as the months passed, one thing became clear. We didn't just want to have a child together. We wanted to be a family. So on a quiet, beautiful day on the island, Damien and I got married. There were no grand crowds or unnecessary celebrations. Just the people closest to us, the ocean surrounding the island, and the man who had once been my greatest enemy standing in front of me. When Damien took my hands and promised to love me for the rest of his life, I couldn't stop the tears. Because I remembered everything. My father's death. My vow. The day I entered Damien's syndicate. The lies. The revenge. The bullet that nearly took him from me. And the truth that changed everything. I had entered his life wanting to destroy him. Instead, he had given me a reason to live. And now, standing beside him as his husband, with our baby growing inside me, I finally understood that sometimes fate doesn't give us the life we planned. It gives us the life we never knew we needed. We spent the rest of our days waiting impatiently for the little girl who would soon enter our lives. Our daughter. The tiny person who would complete the family we had fought so hard to find. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for tragedy. I was waiting for happiness.